Hi, everybody. This is Rob Packard from Medical Device Academy. And today we're going to cover indications for use. And it may seem like a very simple topic, but we're going to cover it in a lot more depth than most people see because we're actually going to cover a couple of real examples. And we're going to actually show you how to fill in the FDA eStar template. That's version 5.3, the newest version. And we're also going to show you how to justify differences between a predicate indication for use and yours. And we're actually going to start out with what is an indication for use, how it's different from an intended use, and how it's different from the intended purpose for a device that is going to be CE marked, because they use a different term, intended purpose. So let me switch over my screen to our slide deck here. Here we go. And start the slideshow from the beginning. Beautiful. So this is going to be first covering what is the difference between the intended use and the indication for use and the intended purpose. So here we go. When you purchase this from our website, you will get all these documents. I'm showing you a screen capture of our Dropbox folder. Plus, there will be the recording in there so you can show other people in your company and do the training for new employee orientation, sort of your onboarding process. But for those of you that are watching this live on one of our streaming platforms, don't hesitate to put something in the chat. You can also watch this because I'm not going to pull this one down. Most of the videos, we pull them down and we only have them live if you catch it live. And then if you don't, you got to buy it. But if you want to get all this extra content, the only way to get it is to buy it. And you go to our 510K course page, and that's where it can be found. I think it's training course like number 4. We have like 33 of them for the eStar, and I think this is number 4. So it's near the top of the list. And they all have dates, and they say what the title is. So here you go. What is the intended use? So intended use is a broader term. It's the purpose of the device, but don't get confused with the intended purpose that they use in Europe, because they mean more than intended use. They mean even more than indication for use when they're using that term in Europe. So specifically, intended use is the general case. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but it should not be included in your instruction for use. Do not do that. I have all clients that do it, and some of them want to keep it in there, and that's fine. It's not that they'll reject your submission because of it, but it's not required. So don't make your instruction for use longer than you need to by putting something in there that adds absolutely no value for your customers. You have to have the indication for use. You do not have to have the intended use. The intended use is the broad case. If you've already got in the indication for use, you shouldn't need intended use in there. That's just for the purposes of the substantial equivalence comparison, which is based on intended use, not on the indication for use. Okay, but when you are trying to show substantial equivalence, they want to show how any differences in the indication for use are justified. If there's a difference in the intended use, you can't use that as a predicate. So if they're not the same intended use, you got no shot. But if there are differences in the indication for use, you can justify those, and that's part of what we're going to cover today. For the indications for use, that is specifically the disease or condition, whether you're going to diagnose, treat, or prevent, or cure, or mitigate with this device that you've created or IVD that you've created. It's the very specific cases. And I think examples are really how we should do this. So that's the next slide. But the form that you use is FDA form 3881. If you're submitting a 510K, you don't have to have that form because it's already part of the eStar. They made it much simpler, embedded it right into the FDA eStar for you. So first example we have is a fracture fixation. If you are creating a device to fixate a bone that broke, there are lots of different types of fracture fixation devices out there. A lot of them are plates. And these bone fixation or fracture fixation devices, the intended use is bone fracture fixation. But the most common example, and this is taken right from the FDA's guidance document on substantial equivalence, you can have breaks in the middle of the bone. You can have breaks on the end of the bone. When you hit like this with your fist on a wall, that's usually on the end of the bones. But when you have somebody clip you, a lot of times that's going to be in the middle of the bone. I had a weird injury where it came down and the femoral on the tibial broke the tibial plateau and split it lengthwise, which is a whole different type of break altogether. It was both the end of the bone, the epiphyseal damage, and it split the bone. So it was like this break here, but much, much longer, and it was on the tibia instead of the femur like that's showing. And you don't have to know all the anatomy unless you're doing orthopedic devices, and then it would be a little important to have that little basic anatomy knowledge. But as you're looking at the different devices, what part of the body is it for? What organ is it for? Is it for pediatric patients? Is it for adult patients? These are the things that we include in the indication for use. So, what are we trying to treat here? Okay. I'm going to get into some specific examples other than bone. So, flow measurement. We have ultrasound is one way to measure flow through a pipe of any kind, including through blood vessels. So if you have an extracorporeal measurement system, so that would be like on a dialysis system, the example on the left, you can have that little clamped on ultrasound sensor over a tubing, and that extracorporeal blood flow can be measured very accurately. Whereas the example on the right, we're putting it on a blood vessel, so it's much, much smaller, and you get that little probe with a little tiny sensor. So usually the sensor would be much smaller for that smaller blood vessel, and you'd have to have different sizes for different types of blood vessels. Some would be reusable, some would be disposable, and they would all be contacting tissues, so they have to be biocompatible. So lots more requirements, sterility, reprocessing, and you have to have the size just right. Whereas the other examples, outside the body, non-sterile, much easier to meet those requirements. But they're both using the exact same technology. And so same intended use, blood flow measurement, just one's outside the body, one's inside the body, so different indications. Here's another example. So if you have an IVD assay for detecting infection in patients, some are going to look at bacterial, some are going to look at yeast, some are going to look at mold and fungi, some are going to look at viruses. After COVID, we had all these respiratory virus detection kits that were created. And, when you have a cough in cold and flu season, what is it? It could be all kinds of things. And we used to call it the common cold was COVID. But then we had COVID-19 and we started calling it something different. It's still just a virus most of the time, but which virus is it? And knowing which virus might change how you treat the patient and how concerned you are about what the patient's outcome is going to be, and how carefully we have to keep that patient segregated from other patients. So you typically do a swab of the nasal cavity, and then you put that swab in some culture media, and then you run this assay, and they use PCR technology to replicate the DNA of the device, or DNA of the virus, or the RNA of the virus, depending on what type it is. And then they are looking at that sequence, and they have specific probes for specific viruses. And depending on which probes come up as positive, then they can say, you have this. You might have more than one. So many of these, you have mixed cultures where you have, you have multiple viruses, lucky you. So some of them, they may be asymptomatic, some may be very low concentrations, but it depends on what you're looking for and what your test is capable of. And so we have the COVID-19 on the left and the H1N1 on the right, and they look very different in those models, but they also look very different from a DNA sequence standpoint. So one would be, we just want an assay for detecting infection. The other one is a very specific type of assay, a PCR multiplex nucleic acid test. So multiplex means it's going to look for multiple types of gene sequences, and it would be for respiratory tract, and it would be a specific type of specimen. So we made it very, very specific in this example. Now, when you are going to fill in this indication for use, I have an example of the form 3881 on the left. And as I said, that's already embedded in your FTA eStar, so you don't have to create it if you're doing an eStar. If you are doing a pre-sub, an SIR meeting, a 513G, something like that, if you use the new pre-star template 1.0, then that will have this embedded already in it. It'll just look a little different because they've modified form 3881 for pre-subs and 513Gs. But if you're not using the pre-star and you're going to use it as an FDA e-copy submission, then you'll need this form for indication for use. And even if you think it's going to be a de novo, you would still use this form. You're not going to fill in the 510K number at the top, but you are going to put in your device name, the indication for use, and then you're going to check one of these two boxes here, and I should have my little highlighter on. Okay, so you're going to have either this box checked for prescription or over-the-counter or both. So you fill in this section, you fill in this section, and check one or both of those boxes, but you leave this blank. So that's for if you're doing an FDA e-copy for a 513G, an SIR meeting, that would be a submission issue review meeting, or some other type of pre-sub where that pre-star is not required yet. I recommend it, but it's not required yet. And then if you are doing a comparison, so let's say you have a slightly different wording that you want to use, or a very different wording that you want to use for your indication than a potential predicate, and you want to explain your rationale why you think that is equivalent. The example that I have on the right is a tool that we developed. It's just a template to help you make that comparison. So it has different parts. The first part is saying what is the applicable regulation. So you're going to copy and paste that in. What is the predicate's indication? And then what is your indication? And then you're going to quote from, so here you just list what the three are, and then you would have an actual copy and paste of the regulation, a copy and paste of the indication from the predicate, a copy and paste from yours, and then you're going to have your comparison justification at the bottom. And we don't use these volume and documents very much anymore because we're not doing 510Ks. Using that FDA copy, we use the FDA eStar instead. So you might just have the document number instead. And if you want to know more about how to do that, we have this location here where we've had that before. That was one of the few links that I didn't check, so I'm not 100% sure. So if you're looking for that link and you can't find it, let me know in the comments below, and I'll find you the right link. See, somebody's put a question in here for me already. So what is the product code example for a fixation device? Okay, so we will search that in a moment. We're going to switch gears, and I will come back to that. And another question we had here is this also used to confirm the applicability of a predicate? So yes, this right here, this template that we created, that's exactly what you would use it for. But in a pre-sub, you wouldn't use that document in a 510K. I'm going to show you how you would do it in a 510K differently. But the part that you would use for the 510K, so if you did this through a pre-sub and the FDA agreed with it, you would just copy this bottom paragraph that you created that the FDA agreed with, and you'd paste it right into the FDA start, and I'm going to show you where. So good question, Mark. Thank you. Okay, so where are the different templates found? So if you bought our FDA 510K course, we have a 510K templates and a 510K webinars. The 510K templates has two different ones. One is miscellaneous templates and one is 513G templates. The 513G templates has this comparison of intended use and indication for use. That particular blank version is not included in this webinar that I have right now. Instead, I've included two that I've actually filled in for you as examples. So you can just take those examples and modify them for your product. So that is included, and then but just not the blank version. And then if you were looking for the other one, the form 3881, because you're not using the pre-star for some reason, then we've also put in the miscellaneous templates that FDA 3881. So these are the two that I'm going to be showing you how they're filled in. But this one here, I'm actually going to use the FDA E-Star for instead of the blank template. They're the same, but I want to show you some other things in the E-Star while I'm at it. So here's what the Form 3881 looks like. In an actual E-Star, you see this red bar over here indicates it's a required section. It's on page 6 of 24. Your E-Star is going to get longer as you fill it in. It might be 30, 35 pages, even 40 pages. But near the very beginning of your submission is going to be this page. And what would change the page numbers is if you had some standards that you added. So as you add standards, it's going to get longer, and some other questions might make it get longer. But you put your indications here, your device name here, and you leave this blank unless you're doing an additional information request, in which case it would be populated. And then you check one or both of those two boxes. And this bookmarks over on the right-hand side shows you where it's found in the submission. It's found right here. So it's near the top. You have your application type, your administrative information like your address, and then your device description section. So that's where it's found. It's right after the device description section, you will find indication for use. And right before classification, which we're also going to cover. So the example that was asked there, what is a product code example for a fixation device? Normally, we would look up in the 510K database. So since that was brought up as a question, I'm just going to quickly see if I can bring that over. Make sure I've still got StreamYard working right. Yes, it's showing correctly. So the way you get to this page is it's the medical devices databases, all the medical device databases for the FDA. You go to fda.gov, then you click on the menu in the top right-hand corner, then medical devices, and then go to the bottom and find the right link. So I'll actually do that for you. So we got FDA, whoop, wrong website, fda.gov, then menu, then medical devices, which is right here. And then you scroll down a little bit to all databases. So this gives you all the databases. And the one we're going to want right now is classification, because the question was, what is the product code for a fixation device? And so we'll just put in bone fixation device. And there you go. You get a whole bunch of codes, and it's only giving me 10 out of 20. So we actually have to expand that. Normally, they give you a little thing here that lets you expand the number of results. They've been playing around a little bit with the FDA website lately, and some things have been disappearing in the databases. And this is another example where things are disappearing. So if you want to see the second page, now you have to do this instead of asking for more records to show. We were talking about the different types of bone fixation plates. So external, that isn't probably what we're going to want. This is a suture anchor. Don't think any of those is a plate. Here we go. So we have pins and plates. This is one possible one. It's pediatric. There's a rod. So this is an intermedullary rod inside your femur. So maybe I missed it on the previous page. Anchor, bone cement, elbow. Not sure that we found the right one here. This is how you would do the search. I think it's just not that one. So we'll look up plate and see if we find that. So this has quite a bit more. So we will try looking up bone plate. There we go. That would probably be a good one. So that's just for dental though. And so we get this other one, bone fixation plate here. That's exactly what we want. HRS is the code. I didn't have it memorized off the top of my head. So it's just going into the classification database and trying different keywords until you get it. If you use the quick search instead of the advanced search, you tend to get more results. The advanced search normally narrows it down to exactly what you want, but sometimes you get nothing. So we actually, I got kind of lucky here in only a couple of tries, and we found exactly what we were looking for. But the examples that I was showing there would fall under HRS, but there's a wide variety of different plates that would fall under that code. So that's how we answer that question. Now we're going to go back to, so if this is a completely new example, we are going to look up a stethoscope, an electronic stethoscope. So if I were going to look it up, I had already done this search to speed things up a little bit so we don't have that little delay. But if you go into the 510K database, which is this database right up here, and on that on that big long list of them, it's approximately in the middle, and it's alphabetical. So it begins with pre-market, so P, the letter P, instead of the number 5. So pre-market, notification, 510K, databases where you would look. And the thing that you would type in would be electronic stethoscope. And it would give you a few options. And this is the one that we were looking for electronic stethoscopes. And then they list them from the most recent to the oldest. And this happens to be the most recent one for electronic stethoscopes. And it was a perfect example for this presentation. So I chose that example, and I'm doing a screen capture of it. And what we're looking for here is the regulation number, the classification number, and the summary. And we need that information in order to fill in the indication section in your 510K or in a pre-sub. So this here gives you just the link to that if you want to go direct instead of hunting for it. So in the product classification database, which I just demonstrated, you could type in keywords like stethoscope, and then it's only going to give you the DQD and so the product code, and it's going to give you the regulation number, but it won't give you any 510Ks that you can use as an example and try to claim substantial equivalence to. So it gets you half of the information, but not all of the information if you go to classification. But most people start with classification to figure out what the 3-letter product code is. And then once they have the 3-letter product code, then they go to the 510K database with that 3-letter product code. So I think I can go back again. Oh, so let's see if I can click on the right place. Here. So we're back on the same screen. So we had HRS as the code. We copy and paste that code. We go back to the main databases page. We go down to 510Ks, and we type in this HRS code, and we search. And so it gives me a whole bunch of HRS codes. The one that we were looking for this for the stethoscope is DQD. And you can see that's the first one at the top of the list. So that's the one we're going to click. And if you just click on that 510K number, it gives you more information, which is our next slide that I was going to show you. Okay, so next slide here. Oh, sorry, that is the next slide here. And then I was going to actually show you when you click on so this regulation is another item here, 871.875. That regulation number, when you look that up or click on it, it gives you this. And the intended use for that is this right here. So that's the general, but the specific indications would be more specific than this. So if you're looking for what is the intended use of that product, of that regulation, this is it. But the specific indications are at the 3-letter product code level and at the 510K summary level. So now I'm going to show you the 510K summary for that specific stethoscope we were looking at. We looked at the 510K summary. So just to go back and show you what that summary looked like again, you click on this link right here, and it pulls it up on the screen, and you scroll down a little bit, and there it is. So that's what we were just looking at. Right here. So this right here is the indication for use. We don't have a K number, but they do because they already had it issued, and this is actually cleared in the market. It's prescription only, and here's the name of the device, and that's their indications. So when you are comparing it, let's say the company is coming up with a brand new stethoscope. It's electronic, but it's only for pediatric patients. And what they've done to try to minimize the amount of cleaning that they have to do and save a little bit of space, they've put only the bell portion in the actual NICU with the pediatric newborn infants, and they want to keep those patient specific. They don't want to move or for only one patient, one newborn, and not mix them so they don't transmit disease or contaminate one baby with the germs of another baby. So by having just the bell dedicated, they don't have to have all the electronics and the software that you would normally have an electronic stethoscope embedded in the bell. You just need to have a microphone and a transmitter going to your mobile device. So all the reading of it and all the listening to it and all that can be done on a device that doesn't come anywhere near the baby. It could even be outside of the room, conceivably, and you could record it and look at it and things like that. But the bell itself is going to be what we want in the NICU with the baby, and you have a different bell for each baby. And so this is obviously only going to be a prescription use device. They're not actually writing a script, but it's used in a professional healthcare environment by professional users. And it's a very specific use environment. It's very specific for pediatric babies that are very, very small. So you're going to want probably a smaller bell than you would normally use for adults. So there are definitely some technological differences between this device, particularly size, and the disconnection of the bell from the rest of the device that are going to matter because you have wireless functionality and things. Could you use this electronic stethoscope in the middle that's the predicate? Yes, you could, because the indications are the same. You just have to come up with some way of demonstrating with validation and verification testing that the technological characteristics that are different do not address new issues of risk in that you validated them properly. So you might have to have a reference device, you might have to do certain testing, but the indications is the primary thing that you want to focus on for whether this can be a predicate or not. So it's the newest one, and we have some differences here because this particular predicate identifies that it's for adults and pediatrics. So if you're looking for where that is, I will go back to my little highlighter here. So it says it right here, pediatric and adult patients, where this says here, intended for use with newborn pediatric patients. So that's what's different. The other thing that it says here is this NICU stethoscope is the name. So the name is different. That's a trivial difference, but it is a difference. But it says only. So only with newborn pediatric. So that's part of the difference. And then up above, they say, we have the name is different here in both of them. Oh, I didn't. Sorry about that. I made a mistake. I forgot I had renamed it NICU scope instead of pediatric. So make sure your names match throughout instead of your quick example that you do for your training. But for the rest of this, all of this part is identical down to whereby the clinician, blah, 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 different networks. So all of that stuff is the same. Every single thing here is the same down to network, word for word. The names are different and then who it's for. But then when you get to the next part, it says over here, the name brand, I just said the device. It's fine to do that. You don't always have to keep on repeating the name of the device. You can just say the device is intended to be used by, this is professional users. Over here, it says professional users in a clinical environment or lay users. Or lay users is not there. So when you're looking at this in a clinical environment or lay users in a non-clinical environment, that part is not included. We've got intended for use by professional users in a clinical environment. It doesn't have the other part. Why? Because it's specifically for a NICU. They designed it just for the NICU. They want it very accurate. They want it very, very small. They want it to be reusable, but cleanable, very cleanable, because you're going to go from one infant to another, but you're going to dedicate it to that patient, and you want to be able to keep on using your mobile device between the different units. Normally, we would want to do wireless coexistence testing to make sure you can't connect to another device. In this particular case, it'll be in a hospital, and we want to be able to pair it with multiple devices. So the opposite of wireless coexistence testing is what you normally do. In this case, we want to be able to pair one mobile device with multiple of these, and so that would be okay. So that's a very different use case. And so what we come up with for the justifications over on this other column is they have both the same identical indications, but the intended patient population of the subject device is limited to newborns because the bell of the device is smaller. So we give a reason. And then we have the subject devices intended for use by professional users because the mobile app that allows the user to listen may be connected wirelessly with multiple bells that are dedicated to each newborn in the NICU. So we've made it very clear why we've done that and how the use case is different. And then we justify down below here how we're going to get away with this, or not get away, but how we're justifying this is not unsafe and it's going to perform as intended. Differences in the intended patient population, intended users, and intended use environment are addressed with human clinical studies and summative human factors testing. So we're actually going to take it into a NICU and use it. We're going to give it to a hospital, and we're going to have them use it under an IDE, and we're going to do a summative human factors testing. Where would we do the summative human factors testing? We would do that on healthy newborns. And we might do it in the individual suites outside of the NICU, where there's lower risk, and we would have the parents sign the informed consent and say, yes, 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 you can do the usability testing. And that would be a safe environment for us to be in for doing a usability study. And we would have to get permission from those mothers. If that's okay, can we do this? It could be during like a 2-month visit or a 6-month visit at a doctor's office instead of at the hospital. But ultimately, once we've shown that the human factors piece is okay and we feel that's safe, then we would say, okay, now we're ready to do this clinical study in an actual NICU. And we would actually get the IDE and go ahead with that. And it might be something they would say, no, this doesn't require an IDE. All we need is an IRB to approve this. And that depends on the particular protocol that you're going to use, whether it's going to be a significant risk device or a non-significant device. But this is an example of a strong justification for differences in the indication for use, and that's what you want to put in your 510K. And this is what should be in your substantial equivalence comparison table. And this is just the first row of that table. Okay, so the next example we're going to give you is not a blood glucose system, but it's actually going to be used, it's actually going to be a cholesterol check. It's a cholesterol cholesterol assay for testing your HDL and LDL and very low density cholesterol at home. So it's an OTC test. But the predicate we found, even though it does have an OTC and it does have cholesterol, it also does a whole bunch of other things too. And so therefore, the primary code they put it under is LBW, which is for blood glucose. And we're only going to have LBR, which is the cholesterol. So how are we going to handle this one? So I'm going to show you. But this is the predicate that we've chosen, and you'll see why in a minute. We're going to go look at that 510K summary, and I'll show you. But you might have been looking for the cholesterol code. You look for the LBR. So you might have typed in LDL or HDL or lipoprotein or something to get this LBR code in this regulation. And then this next slide shows you what the intended use is. This describes what that assay is, and that's exactly what we want to do. We want to just measure the cholesterol. That's all we're trying to do, not all these other analytes, just cholesterol. So this is a good code and a good regulation. But how are we going to address this using that other predicate that's for so many other things, and how are we going to address that this is over-the-counter only? So we look for this particular 510K. So I'm actually going to pull that 510K up for you. And the reason why I'm going to pull it up for you, and this example is actually saved in Dropbox for you. So let me make sure I'm still streaming correctly. Yes, we're still streaming correctly. Preparing for reading. Great. Cancel. So you're looking at this 510K summary, and it has all these different product codes, and the one we want is right here. So when you look through this 510K summary, it has different indications. This one is, if you scroll down a little bit more, it's for prescription only. So it doesn't have over-the-counter. So that's not going to help us. It also does cholesterol and glucose. We just want cholesterol. This one here, it's looking at cholesterol and HDL, prescription only again. Not helpful. This one here, cholesterol, HDL, glucose, prescription. Not helpful. Cholesterol, HDL, triglycerides, prescription. Not helpful. This one, glucose, prescription. Not what we want. Finally, we found what we're looking for. We found an OTC one, but it still has cholesterol and glucose. So how are we going to address this? Let me show you. So that's the same page. We finally got to the same page. It's over the counter here, and it's got cholesterol, but it's also got the glucose on the same page. So how are we going to do that? I copied and pasted in the indications exactly as they appear on that version of the indication for use. And you can see from that example, you're allowed to have multiple indication for use in a 510K. But our test, we just want to have cholesterol. That's all we want, and we only want OTC. So instead of this whole thing, all I did is I changed the name from what they had to cholesterol home test. And both of them say home test, so they're both the same use environment, but one is for cholesterol and glucose. We just want cholesterol. So I only copied the cholesterol part. So that's verbatim, word for word that, but I deleted this part. So this whole part here has been deleted. And we modified the wording here. So this one here had this consists of all these tests. We don't need that. We only need the strips for the cholesterol. So this cholesterol test is for quantitative determination of total cholesterol in capillary whole blood. So for quantitative determination of total cholesterol, and so we took out the glucose part. This would probably be easier if I use a different color. So I'll give you a different color here. So the things that we took out this part, we took out all of this. We changed the name, of course. So in fingertip, and is intended to be used by a single person and should not be shared. This system is for in vitro diagnostic use only. So I took out glucose, I took out the other names of the different strips, and I took out all the glucose stuff down here. But so all I did is subtracted. I didn't add anything in except the name. And that was just a substitution name for name. So over here in the indication or justification differences, I say both devices have identical indication for use with regard to OTC cholesterol test. But the predicate device includes multiple indications for use and is intended for OTC and prescription use. These differences do not impact the safety and clinical performance of the subject device because each test is performed separately by the predicate and each indication is separately identified by the predicate in the instruction for use sold with the corresponding strips. So they have different strips for different indications with different instruction for use, and they're sold differently. Some are sold in Walmart, or they're sold in CVS, and others are distributed by and used by their doctor. So they're going to be different in the instruction for use, distributed differently. So that's why this is okay. So that's our justification for removing those things and still using this as a predicate. And you would present this as your strategy to the FDA and say, do you agree that this doesn't create any new issues? You might word the question, does the FDA have any concerns or comments with this strategy? Somebody put in another comment here. How do I find guidance and special controls for a device? So we have a whole separate video on that, but because you asked, we will see if we can accommodate that right now. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen here. And we will type in FDA Special Controls Database. Okay, so they actually have a special controls database just for this purpose. And unfortunately, it doesn't have all of the special controls there are because they stopped creating individual guidances for that. But this is the easiest way to find stuff, is to actually use the database and search. So you type in a search, and we could type in something like cholesterol, and there's nothing. But there isn't always one out there. So if I put in glucose, nothing. Now let's try thermometer. Nothing. We're having a big strikeout here. Let's try okay, so we have one that shows up here, electrocardiograph electrodes. So there's an example of one, but it's 2011. Part of the reason why we're not getting very many hits for some of these popular ones, the FDA is gradually shifting from having dedicated guidance documents to instead putting the special controls right in the regulations. So if you're looking in the regulations, we'll go back to where you find that. So medical devices, scroll down, so you can actually go here to the classification database, and you look for something like what would be a good one? Glucose. So a blood glucose meter. I think that code was, maybe we need to use blood glucose. So that gave me a much shorter list. Code I'm looking for is not there. I think it's on the next page. This is the code we're looking for, the over-the-counter test. And we have a regulation number here. You look in the regulation number, and they will actually list in here if there is a special controls guidance document. But for some tests, they'll actually put the regulation, they'll actually put the requirement in here. So I just happen to know one out there. Let me go back again. There's a brand new UV light disinfection system. So I'll type in UV and see if I can find it that way. So there's only 15 devices, so that should be helpful. It's not on that page. So skins, maybe it's not even on here yet. Maybe they haven't added it. Oh, that's an old one. I don't think it's... Oh, this one has exactly what I'm looking for. So usually you have separate guidance documents. What the FDA is going to is after the identification section in the classification where they say special controls, now they're actually listing what the special controls are. So if you're looking for what are the special controls, They actually have it right here in the regulation now. And that makes it faster for them to publish it than having a guidance document under review. Instead, it's under a regulation, much faster, much shorter. It's not as pretty, but much shorter, much less work for them. So they just give you a list of what the special controls are. And all those things have to be met. And so when the 510K E-Star says, what are the special controls? That's what it is. So I hope that answers your question. If you still have questions about it, let me know in the chat. Okay, we're going to go back to the presentation here. So we explain that example, and each of these examples is provided elsewhere for you. So you can find them in the actually in that folder. But now we're back to our last slide. So I'm going to switch screens here to the FDA E-Stars, and I'm actually going to provide a couple of examples for you. So this is the version for non-in vitro diagnostic devices, and this is the example for in vitro diagnostics. I'll go all the way to the top of the form. This is for in vitro diagnostics. So the first example we're going to go through is going to actually be this LBH code. So we're going to go through this cholesterol test first. So we identified that LBH was the code. So LBR is the code. So we go to the in vitro diagnostic one here. Other things that we needed to know here, this particular test is maybe the place we need to be on to find this information. Let me see if I can help you find that. So that was the stethoscope example. I'm going to pull up the other one again. K193406, I think was the number. Yeah. So what the information that I needed in here was clinical chemistry is the classification panel that handles this. So if we are dealing with, this is, once again, we're in the in vitro diagnostic one. We scroll down. We're in the device description section now. We keep on going. There's the indication for use section, but we're going to go one more further, the classification section. In here, we're going to need clinical chemistry. Then we're looking for the regulation number. And remember, that was included here at the top of this. The classification 8621345. So 862, we're looking for 1345. Went too far. So there's the glucose test system. That's what they have for glucose. We want the one that's specifically for LBH, which is different. So we got to go back and figure out what the right code is. We had the wrong one there. So we want this one. It's 1475 for cholesterol. So we'll go back to that again. Sorry, having a hard day here. 1475 is what I want. There's the lipoprotein test system. And then it should give us all the codes that are related to that. We want the LBR one. So there we have that. And because our test is just going to be that, we don't need any other possible codes here. Now we're going to go up here to the device name. So we're going to pull up our little example here. That's the stethoscope. We need the other one. Here is the example that we have here, and I'll make this as big as I can for you so you can actually see. So we're going to put in the name, cholesterol home test. Whoop. So we drop that in there. Then we're going to go back again. We're going to take this, copy and paste it in. So that's perfect. And we're going to have this be an over-the-counter test. So that piece is done. And now there's one more piece that we have to address. Wrong place. It's in the substantial equivalence section. So when we're filling in the substantial equivalence section, this is not a pre-amendment device. We're going to type in that predicate number. So that's K9 3406. We're going to type in the predicate's name. So we'll put that in there. And we're going to put in this medical specialty again. It would be nice if it automatically populated, but it doesn't. Because it is possible it could be a different code for the predicate. I believe that actually it is in this particular case because they used the glucose one. So the 1345. So that's what they used it. And then they have multiple product codes there, but they used this particular one. And then the difference, we're going to put in this section here, what is the difference? That's what this yellow box is. Explain your differences or justify your differences. So we're going to go back to our example here, and we're going to take this table that we created for the substantial equivalence. We're going to just take that explanation for the differences, and we're going to copy and paste it right here. And then when I click outside of the box, it will expand the box a little bit so I can see it properly. And yes, everything with Adobe Acrobat takes a little longer than you'd like. But there we have exactly what we put in the substantial equivalence comparison table in there. And then down here below, you're going to put in the technological differences. So that's getting outside of the scope of this training. But this training was just focusing on the indication for use. There's your justification. There's the predicate information. Here's the classification information for your device. And here is the indication for use section and over the counter. So everything we have marked up correctly. Okay, so that's how you do that example. Now I'm going to do it again for the non-IVD example. So we'll switch screens. So here's the non-IVD example. And remember, this is the stethoscope that we're doing. So this particular code here, we'll start down here. I believe this is, I can't remember. So we're going to have to look it up. It's not that example. DQD. Okay, so here's the example. This stethoscope, I'm just trying to find the group this is under. In cardiac electrophysiology. So I think this is going to be under cardiology for the DQD code. Probably help if we knew what the code was. It's 870-1875. Yep, so we got 870, so that means cardiovascular is correct. The first three determine what review panel it is, and we want 1875. So we go down there, there's stethoscope, and now we're looking for electronic stethoscope. That's the DQD. So now we filled in that section correctly. Let's go back up here, get the name of the device. So we can pull up that, NICU e-stethoscope. Then we want to change this little part here. Okay, now we get that typo corrected. Here's my indications. And we want this to be prescription use only. So that part is correct now. And now we're going to scroll down to this part here, We're going to say, no, this isn't a pre-amendment device. How you know it's not a pre-amendment device, you have a regulation. Any pre-amendment devices won't have a regulation associated with them. Then we need the number for this. So this is K233313. And the trade name of this, we'll have to copy that. There we go. The medical specialty, it's the same in this case, whereas the other one, it wasn't the same. Stethoscope. Then we have electronic. And now we need to put in what the differences are here. So we just take that justification we had here, copy, paste. Done. So now we have everything we need, and it turned green over here. We don't have the technological characteristics or the comparison for use table. One of the things I didn't show is the attachment of the indication for use or the substantial equivalence document. So you just go in here and you take your substantial equivalence comparison. It can be in Word, it can be in PDF. I recommend only attaching PDFs, but it'll accept either one. So then that turns green as well. And then if I just type anything in here, I could say identical technological characteristics and to predicate. And then we would be done with that section. But that's not actually true in this case. We had some technological differences, and you have to explain those. But there, in a very short amount of time, we basically completed the entire substantial equivalence section. I just need to write a better explanation here. And our table was incomplete. It only had the first row filled in. But that's how you fill in those sections. And the focus here needs to be the indication for use. That's the thing that determines whether your predicate's going to be a viable predicate or not. And the mistake people make is focusing on the technological characteristics, which you have more flexibility on how you justify than you do for the indication for use. So getting back to our slide deck, the last slide here, that was the end of today's training. I'm just going to go back to my StreamYard and see if I had any other questions pop up. Sorry, it's taking me a moment here to get back to StreamYard. So thank you very much, Mark, saying that was very useful. Appreciate that. Another person said, don't quote me on that. If there are no differences in the indication for use, do you leave it blank? No, that what you should do is say same or equivalent. So you could also say identical. So if they're truly identical, word for word, you could put identical, you could put same, and you could put equivalent. If you could even be more specific, you'd say identical except for the name or the device name. So, or trade name. So identical except for the trade name, same except for the trade name, because they're never going to be exactly the same unless it's a generically worded indication. We see that a lot on wound dressings. So a lot of wound dressings, they won't even give the name of the dressing. They'll just say, the dressing is intended for use for minor cuts and scrapes, for example. That would be an OTC indication. They'll have a very generic one, and everybody will use that. And so then they're truly identical. But I've seen same, identical, and equivalent, and I've seen sometimes the FDA will come back. They're not exactly the same. This is different. Please explain it. So it could just be except for the trade name. Some reviewers are that nitpicking, but usually they're not, but you shouldn't just leave it blank. So I hope that answers your question, Gabriella. And thank you, Lily, for thanking me on that. I'm glad I was able to help you on that. We will be doing some additional trainings here. So I'll go back to the slide deck. Webinars. Today's was specifically on, today's training was specifically on indication for use. The next webinar that's a paid webinar will be the control of records next Monday on the 19th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. So we generally try to do them Mondays and Thursdays, and it's only when I have conflicts that we juggle around the schedule. But Mondays will be control of records, and it's sold with the procedure. And then FDA interoperability testing will be Thursday. So that's part of our 510K course series. If you bought the course series, you get that automatically, and you'll get a notification and login information. If you want to do it a la carte, you can buy it. And if you bought it a la carte, you can always ask for a credit if you're going to upgrade to the full course. But for this Friday, we're going to have a live streaming session on when is the right time to have a design freeze for a device. And that carries on with our theme from yesterday, doing design control. So all yesterday, I was doing nothing but recording stuff on design controls in a pre-sub. Well, slow day, you know. But I did training on design controls. We had to split it into 2 parts because it was 44 slides. This one is only 22 slides, so half as long. And it took us an hour to get through this. So I hope this is helpful for you and explains how to do your indication for use, how to fill in the sections in the eStar, how to write your comparison, how to find the information on the FDA database. So I'm really happy, and we got some great feedback from people. So thank you very, very much. And we'll leave this one up on the website for free. But if you want that stuff that's in the folder, you have to purchase the course. And it can be found on our 510K course page, or right now, I think we might still have this up on our webinars page. But if we've already taken it down, you'll find it on the 510K course page. I think it's webinar number 4. So thank you very much. Hope to see you this Friday on our live streaming. And if you have any suggestions for future ones, just put it in the comments. Whether you're on whatever platform you're on, we'll be checking, and we'll try to respond to your comments. Have a great day. Bye-bye.